Hi everyone, my name is Cloé Anne-Sophie Veilleux. I'm 42 years old. I usually pronounce she and her. I'm the youngest of four children from two math teachers. My parents are 89 and 73 from a very Catholic family in rural Quebec. And I'm talking to you right now from Vancouver because I moved here from my job. I work in the video game industry and has recently joined Relic Entertainment, where I am a senior core technical designer. So I'm a transgender woman, which means that at birth, doctors have assigned me male, and the trans part means essentially that I do not agree with this assessment. The next thing that's important to tell is that I'm a neurodivergent person. I'm twice exceptional, which means I'm autistic and gifted on top of being transgender. So when I was young, I really did not fit in. I had trouble at school having friends. I was actually really good at school and had great grades. Parents being math teachers and all. So I did not make friends easily, and I grew up bullied and othered, and I never really understood why, but clearly people could tell I was different. And it's only when I got to college that I've met some peers. So I joined computer science in college, and there was a computer club in that college that I joined as well. And that's where I met a bunch of people who were just as much into games as I was, into Tetris, role-playing, into exactly the same thing I was. So I finally found my tribe. And one of the person in that group who was a bit of an elder, they were still in college, but they were in their last years while I was starting. We became fast friends. And one of the things she told me is that when I was a kid, I was seen as a nerd. That was the term that people used. And I was a kid with good grade, bad at sports, and liked weird things. And she told me about being a geek. And my mind was blown that day, because essentially being a geek is the same thing as being a nerd, except you're unapologetic about it. You decide to wear a t-shirt that says, I like Transformers, or you proudly tell people you like anime. And I was really surprised by that, because that felt like going against the nature of hiding this because it's shameful. And it took me a couple of years and other friends pushing me to stop caring so much about what people thought of me, and to be quite okay being the weird one out. So I was always the weird one out when I was younger, but at that point I just decided to lean into it. So I actually throughout my career would make it sure to make a point when I would join a new studio or something to very quickly establish I'm a weirdo, so that people would essentially leave me alone. They would cut me a lot more slack than if they thought I was normal. And that actually helped manage my problems, essentially, or hide them. So life became more and more difficult eventually. I started missing a lot of work due to depression. And I almost lost my job. I tried to figure out what was going on. Why was this so difficult? I was making video games, which had been my dream since I was young, and yet I was not happy. And I went and saw a neuropsychologist, which over a couple of months and a few $1,000s later, told me that I was gifted and autistic, things that I never had words for, but made so much sense. I finally understood all my challenge, my difficulties, why I was extra sensitive to a bunch of things like sound or light, touch, taste. And it like it brought a lot of understanding of how my brain works and why some people sometimes would have problems with me, or why I would not understand body language or read between the lines in social situations. So that really helped me, and I was quite glad for it. But together with that diagnosis, my neuropsychologist like saw my depression as it is, and essentially recommended that I seek therapy, which I did. I found a therapist that lived in my city that specialized in twice exceptional children and their difficulties in school. So I literally went there as a 38-year-old version of her normal clientele and started working on trying to figure out what was going on, like why I was not happy at work. Is it a problem of values? Is it a problem of conflict between personalities? Should I become like an entrepreneur and become my own boss because maybe my personality type really doesn't work well at being under someone? So we looked at many angles. And one of the things she told me much later when we were essentially done is that it's very typical that people seek help for work, and that the actual problem is, for example, the relationship in the couple. Like, this is what's not working, and what struggles is work because of that. So in my case, it wasn't a question of relationship since I've been single all my life. It was a question of identity. And it's really interesting how I actually discovered that it was gender identity, because my story really doesn't work with the normal narrative where trans people know since they were young. But in hindsight, I can see that there was signs, and my brain must have known, but consciously, I was absolutely blindsided by it. So what happened is, 2 years later, I was still seeing my therapist, and I was now at 40 years old. There was a big storm in February, lots of snow, and I remember that day very clearly because of all the things that happened around it. But essentially, I had a really important deadline to meet at work, and I had just received a prescription of antidepressant from my family doctor, because in January, like right after the Christmas break, where I should have been energized, I was like completely out of energy. So she gave me some antidepressants, rather strong ones, that were actually dangerous because of how strong they are. Because I would actually feel like I have energy and like I could work for days, except my body actually couldn't do that, but my brain was now convinced. On the plus side, it was great because I could finally be happy at work again and solve problems, which I really like to do. So I did that. I got a big deadline that was coming up really soon, and I worked overtime a couple of days that week. The deadline was on a Monday, and on Thursday night at around 10 p.m., alone at the office, I was finally done. The feature was in, it was working. I had fixed all the problems, or at least most of them. And I sent an email saying, it's done, it's in the box. Awesome, we're on time. I'm going home, but it's snowing a lot. So don't expect me tomorrow, I'm gonna work from home. So I took the bus, I rode home. I had to literally shovel 2 or 3 feet of snow that was covering my entire car that was no longer visible. It was just a mound. So by the time I got home, it was about 2 in the morning. I was exhausted, I was freezing, I was really tired, but I felt like a hero. And that was not the first time that at work I had done something exceptional. I had like a nickname and a reputation for being a miracle worker that would like manage to do sometimes in a week things that were completely insane. And well, Cloé will handle it. And I did. So I felt really good because my value, my self-esteem and value was very much tied to how people thought of me. So I went to bed, and in the morning woke up to a bunch of angry emails and phone calls because apparently by making my feature work, it revealed a problem that the lighting team had not finished their part of the work, and there was like a lighting glitch. So essentially, losing that ability would turn off the light of the world. You could barely see anything. So they blamed me for that. In about 2 or 3 minutes, me and one of my employees fixed it on the phone, because it was as simple as saying, turn on lights after the feature was done, and there you go, problem solved. And we had until Monday, and it was Friday, so like we had plenty of time. But for anybody who saw the movie Office Space, it was exactly the same situation. I got multiple bosses, none of them my actual boss, like blaming me for doing something out of protocol. So that's kind of this, how about this TPS report? Like, we'll send you the memo again. So, like the exact same scene happened to me. And it really destroyed me, because I don't take criticism very well. And I essentially felt like a zero the very next day that I felt like I was a hero. And that broke me. I wanted to ask my therapist for a letter to go on burnout. I was done with work. I was like, I'm going to go on medical leave. I'm done. This is over. I can't keep doing it. So the problem was, my next appointment was 3 weeks away. And I was like, 3 weeks is a long time to carry this feelings inside. So I followed the tips that I saw on the internet, which is when you can't see your therapist, you grab a pen and a paper, or Google Docs as it is, and you start writing. You just write whatever comes to mind. And I have many writer friends, because video game industry. And many of my writer friends knew that I was a bit of a hobbyist writer, and often gave me the typical advice, write about what you know. And I'm like, all right, it is late on a Friday. I'm pissed from work. I want to burn out. I need to write something. What should I write? And the first thing that came to mind is, I'm going to write a transgender story. I've been reading them religiously since I was like 17 on the internet before going to bed every single night. Chances are, I can probably write one of my own. I've read enough. And I started doing that. After one chapter, which is 3,000 word long, nothing really had happened. I had like introduced the main character pretty much. But by the time I finished that, my brain just decided to tell me out of the blue, all right, I give up, you're trans, okay? Are you happy now? And I was taken quite by surprise by this revelation, because I was not expecting this, even though in a way maybe I should have, because I've been reading kind of fiction for 23 years. But it still came as a surprise. And my conscious brain was like, wait, what do I do with this newfound information? So for 3 days, I couldn't sleep. And I really had trouble understanding what was going to happen next. I thought of many different possibilities and plans and figure out, oh, that's why I play so many video games and escape into them. That's because this is the only time where I actually, like, my real personality comes out, because in real life, I'm never real. I'm always just the person that people expect. But in games, I would just be me. So I would play 8 hours of games per day on top of the 8 hours of work, plus transit, plus eating, which meant I would sleep about 3 to 4 hours a night. And that's for like my entire 17 years of my career. Now that I realized that this is what I was doing, well, I told myself, I can probably keep doing that, right? It's worked so far. Alas, I don't think this is how it works. And once you have that egg cracking moment where you realize you're trans, you just can't keep using escape strategies to deny it. And it took only a couple of days that I decided, no, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to at least reach out to a gender therapist, see where that goes. COVID struck, and essentially cleared pretty much everybody's calendars because every appointment in person got canceled. And well, I'm into tech, so I have webcams. I have like software to do work from home. So my gender therapist essentially told me like, I suddenly have lots of room. How about this Wednesday? Um, I started talking to her, and she gave me like a rundown how many meetings it normally takes, things like that. So about 5 meetings of 1 hour each, and then another one to give you the letter if it comes to that. And it took 3 meetings in 8 days. So from Wednesday to the Thursday next week, I had my diagnosis letter. I knew my shit because as an autistic person, transgender health was essentially one of my special interests. I had researched the hell out of it. I knew everything about surgery, HRT, whatever you want to know about being trans, I knew. I was just fascinated by it. That's how I explained it, at least consciously. So yeah, that really didn't take too much time. And essentially a month precisely to the day that I came out to myself, I had my letter. And exactly 1 month later, I had met my endocrinologist, I had done my blood works, and I was starting HRT. So it took me 2 months from coming out to starting a medical transition. I actually came out to my best friend first, really soon after I came out to myself. It took me 36 hours to get the courage just to ask him for an evening, to free his evening to be able to chat. Normally we would talk over voice over IP, but I didn't think I could do that for this subject. So I just told him like we're gonna chat on Google Chat or something. And I poured everything out. He knew that I was going to therapy, things like that, because we're really good friends from 20 years ago. But he didn't know the extent of everything, so I literally told him everything. And this was a very crucial point in my story, because I feel that if he had not supported me then, I would not be here today to talk about this. So his support meant everything to me, and his rejection would have meant everything. Thankfully, he was the great guy I knew he would be. He's from Regina, so we've been like gaming together online for 20 years with like time zone difference and everything, but we had the same interest and really close. So after it came out to him, coming out to anyone else was trivially easy. I could tell my coworkers, I could tell my sister and my niece where we went to have just supper, and I just dropped a bomb on them like it was nothing. I did that literally with everyone. I would go to work and have like a brunch with one of my employees, and I would just tell them straight up. There was absolutely no fear because nobody's opinion except that person mattered too. It took me a bit longer before I came out to my parents. I think it's when I started having the endocrinologist appointment was set up, something like that, was when I decided I can't hide that from my parents. Like, I don't want to put a mask on when I go see them for the rest of my life. This is not something I want to do anymore. I've worn a mask in social situation for 40 years. So I decided to come clean, just tell them, but with the blunt of an autistic person calling and saying, "Hi, I'm transgender, bye," or something along those lines. They still don't quite understand, and they are the only people in my family, or actually in my life, who misgender me and dead name. That being the fact that when people call you by your birth name. So my parents struggle, but they're old, they're very Catholic. The Catholic Church is not super keen on transgender people. So it's difficult with them. But after telling my parents, I felt that it was okay to tell my extended family on Facebook. I don't have much of my extended family on Facebook contacts, but some. So made a post about it, got a couple of cousins and people that I almost never talked to recently, or in at least the last like 10 years, reaching out and starting having conversation and talking. And we met in person a bit and started like bonding over for the first time in my life, pretty much, because I was such a socially withdrawn person before. So one of the things I learned by doing that is that amongst my family, siblings and cousins, a lot of people could actually tell that I was not doing well. They could see through the mask that I was like, that I had problems. Nobody reached out to help and nobody knew what it was, what the problem was, but they could tell something was off. So when I came out, a lot of people finally said, oh, that was it. So they didn't say I knew it, which is kind of like always annoying when people tell you that when you come out as trans, because you're like, I just discovered it. How did you know all these years? But in this case, it was I knew it, but it was I knew there was something. So, but for the most part, everyone was supportive and okay with it. So that's the interesting thing. So I came out at work. I think I was on the 16th day of hormones when I sent a big email to the entire studio telling them, hey, I'm still the same person, except I use Cloé now and she, her. This moment where you say to friends or family or coworkers, I'm still the same person, I'm not gonna change, I'm just using a new name and gender pronouns. That's the biggest lie that we believe ourselves. I was really convinced that was true, but now that I look back 2 years ago and my life before that, I've changed so much. It is a crazy change, and it's for the better. But even not trans people, over 2 years, they change a lot. You learn new things, your beliefs change, your taste refine. You're never really the same person. You're constantly in a transition. Of course, mine was a bit more significant than normal people, but it was still just like normal. People change. If there's one thing that I learned from my own journey, both as a neurodivergent person and then when I transitioned. So that advice I think is good for everyone, cis and trans alike, is it's really important to remove the shackles of living to fulfill other people's expectations. Like your self-worth cannot be tied to other people's opinion. Especially since if they die or leave your life, what happens to like your sense of worth, like who you are, if your entire existence was about making someone else happy? I've lived like that, like wearing that mask where I was always the perfect student, the perfect employee, the perfect child. Nobody actually knew me. Like nobody could tell what I like, what's my problems, what my belief and things like that. Like people would know surface level thoughts, maybe the kind of food I like or something. But that was the extent of how people connected with me, because all I wanted was to make as little noise as possible, not rock the boat, be invisible, or at least seen positively. I'm doing my homework, so you can't say anything about me reading a book in your class, things like that. So it's really hard, and it's something that I see a lot of young trans people struggle a lot with, like not wanting, for example, to transition or be themselves because they are afraid of losing their girlfriend or boyfriend or parents or wife. Or spouse, partner. And I find it super sad when I see somebody who decides to not live for themselves for the sake of someone else. I want everybody to be free of like being afraid of other people's opinions or judgment. Like you can just be yourself. Some people will like you for who you really are rather than you constantly trying to be what other people would prefer. So making a world a better place in general, like how can people be more like nicer, more inclusive to transgender people? I think the first step is actually to educate themselves. I'm part of an organization in Quebec that actually sends volunteers like me to school to talk to children, or sometimes to companies to talk to employees about my life as a trans person. So I do essentially like in this video, and I talk about my coming out, my story, and I answer questions so that it's more than just theory about like this is what a trans person is according to the DSM-5, but it is really like this is the life of a trans person. This is the successful life of somebody in game dev who is transitioned, has kept her job, lives happily, has not had transphobia or hate harming her journey at all. So being able to tell people that exists, that's possible. You can be trans and you can have a fulfilling life. It's not something that will lead or that should lead to having like a worse situation. So in an ideal world, that should be true. I'm very blessed and lucky or privileged that I live in Canada, which is a really great country as far as inclusivity. I work in an industry that is very inclusive. I feel that since I transitioned, I actually have more opportunities. People reach out more to recruit me than they did before. So it's like the opposite of being a bad thing for my career. So I'm in a lucky place, but not all industries are like that. Not all countries or provinces are like that. And it would be amazing if the world could just catch on and understand that us living happily it really doesn't change much for anyone. It's just I'm happier than I used to be. I'm more of a person than I ever was. And that's it.